Because the Prime Minister is under mounting pressure to take a U-turn on her mini-budget and borrowing plans after a new opinion poll gave Labour a historic lead over the Conservatives.
But with a mounting cost of living crisis, would the Labour government actually do anything particularly differently? Let's speak now to Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who joins us now in London. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. How are you feeling this morning? On the one hand, you wonder whether Labour must be cock-a-hoop at the moment. On the other hand, the country still needs sorting. So what's your solution?
I'm angry. I'm not happy. I'm angry. What we saw a week ago was the biggest unforced error in British economic policy, perhaps in history, certainly in our lifetimes. And when you ask what we would do differently, I reject the entire premise of the economic approach the government brought to the House of Commons last Friday. I don't believe you can borrow money to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. I don't think you can sack the Permanent Secretary at the Treasury. I don't think you can ignore independent forecasts from the Office of Budget Responsibility, not even let them produce a report, and then think you can get away with it. And what it means is not about opinion polls and who's going to form the next government. It means people who have mortgages or want to get on the housing ladder are now facing untenable pressure. It means the cost of what we're paying for government debt is unnecessarily high. It means the value of sterling is lower and therefore everything else is more expensive that we import in. So, frankly, I want to see the Prime Minister and the Chancellor behind me recalling Parliament, reversing that budget a week ago and telling us what they're going to do.
But reversing the budget's almost impossible, though, isn't it? In the sense that that would in itself create so much uncertainty and instability in the markets.
Well, I think there is a reasonable question that this Chancellor and this Prime Minister may never get that back. I think that is a reasonable point. And, of course, the feedback problem there is exactly as you say. The political instability, therefore, leads to further market instability as people have no faith and trust in the government at all. But, frankly, the approach that they set out a week ago, I didn't believe in. I know it wasn't pitched to me. But the people who have a hugely significant role over our economy, individual traders and investors, people for whom we rely to be able to finance government expenditure and debt, they've got no faith in it whatsoever. And unless the government can restore some of that faith, this problem will not get better. It's only had a temporary improvement because the Bank of England said it would spend £65 billion over 14 days buying government debt in order to stabilise the market, to make sure our pensions industry didn't go off a cliff edge. This is an incredibly serious situation. I don't want to see Conservative colleagues having a glass of champagne at Conservative Party conference. They've caused this problem. Get back here and do your best to fix it. Ideally, step down entirely and let some other people take over.
Of today's meeting between the Prime Minister and the OBR?
Well, it's a bit late for that, isn't it? What we needed, that was a week ago to have the usual robust forecast we would be able to expect. We would have then had some information. You could ask me about specific measures in the budget. What do you think about this? Would you have done this differently? We can't do that because we haven't had the proper process that we would expect. And let's just reflect, when the Chancellor came to Parliament, he said that was impossible. They couldn't do it on the timescale that the government was working on. We now know that's false. So that will further undermine faith in all of the Cabinet, not just the Chancellor and Prime Minister, the lot of them. So yes, using and finally recognising that the OBR plays an important role in budgets in recent years is important, but it's a reflection that even they themselves recognise they've got it wrong. Let's have a little bit more of that and come back and see that budget reversed.
If things go, and let's be honest, let's hope they don't go as wrong as some people are saying, because that's bad for the country. Forget politics, it's bad for the country. But if things really do start to spiral, then what about cross-party work on this? I know the government would have to invite you to do it, but would Labour be willing to do that?
Well, we have a completely different approach to the economy, so they'd have to be willing to listen to that. I would just say, if you look at the formation of this government, it didn't even try and include all parts of the Conservative Party, let alone other political parties. But you're right to say that this should be viewed as a crisis, and the impact on the British people should be the focus. Not the politics of it, not who's up or down within the government, but they've got to understand the scale of the problem they have created. When you talk about contagion, I mean, it's a complicated area, but essentially what we saw with the Bank of England's intervention is them have to intervene because British pension funds were so exposed to government debt, the gilt market, and therefore if the price of that didn't stabilise, there was the possibility of extremely serious contagion. Not on exactly the same way as the financial crisis with Northern Rock, but something that could have been of the gravity of that situation. And honestly, it is just simply not acceptable for government ministers to be out pretending this hasn't happened or that all countries are facing this. That is quite frankly untrue. And the more they dissemble, the more they present it in that way, the lower the level of confidence in the British government will get.